We are picking up where we left off in ranking all of the traits in Marvel Multiverse. This is part 2 of our series. I hope you're enjoying it. Let's get into it. Enhanced Physique is something you've seen me use a couple times on this channel. We treat the character as one size larger than they are for the purposes of lifting, carrying, swinging, and throwing things. This is really fun. I have used this on multiple characters that are attempting to throw combatants because it treats you as one size larger than you are. And there are other ways to treat you as one size larger than you are. Those don't stack. But if you grow to a different size and have Enhanced Physique on top of that, that stacks, meaning that you can grow to a pretty big size and pick up a tank. On the right character build, Enhanced Physique lets you do some awesome things because Marvel Multiverse interacts great with improvised weapons. I covered this when I did the bodybuilder, but the size of objects carries with it a damage multiplier. Enhanced Physique lets you pick up larger things and throw them or swing them at people, meaning that Enhanced Physique lets you pick up larger things with greater damage multipliers. There's a great play style here, and it's really, really fun. So I love Enhanced Physique, but it only works on melee builds that use improvised weapons. And as a result, it's a B, not an A, but Enhanced Physique is quite good, and it's really fun on the right character. Extra occupation gives you an extra occupation. It's that simple. Occupations come with traits. So this is a way to hack and get additional traits. And some are really good. The military occupation gives you some of the best traits in the game for free, and several others do as well. You have to clear this with your narrator because saying I'm a student who's also a military veteran is going to be a little bit strange. There are concepts that can go together and work. And mechanically speaking, being able to pick up an additional 2 or 3 traits for free for the cost of 1 trait is a great deal. Honestly, this is a sneaky A. This is really good and very well might be worth considering as something to take later in your character's career. Extraordinary Origin gives you an additional origin. Most origins give you tags, not traits. And the one really good use for this is being able to pick up an additional origin so that you can be part of a different section of the magic power set, which only interacts with specific origins. There's not nearly as much that you pick up from an origin as an occupation, so this is probably more a C. This gives you some character building things, some role play, but it does not give you a lot of mechanical advantages outside of a few niche opportunities. Next we come to Famous. Famous means that you are very well known, and if people like you, you have an edge on ego checks, and if they don't like you, you have trouble on ego checks trying to persuade them. This only works with whatever identity is actually known in the public. So if you have more than one secret identity, you can take it for 1, but you can take Famous multiple times. It's ego checks, and you also have to be famous, which is going to have some RP baggage coming along with it. I'm struggling with this one. It could be a high C because there is a downside associated with it, or it could be a low B because it does give you some nice ability to get persuasion edges, but there are other ways to pick up persuasion edges that don't have the baggage of being famous. And so I think I have to give this a C+. It's very close to a B for me, but I think it has to be a C+. Next we come to Fearless. You have an edge on all checks having to do with fear. Here's the problem. Name me a power in the game that has to do with fear. It just doesn't exist, right? There aren't conditions that enemies get to impose that have to do with fear, meaning you as the player need to make your character afraid, and then you get an edge on not being afraid when it was your choice. But if you're RPing the situation, don't you get to decide when you're afraid and when you break out of it? this does not have the actual mechanical benefits that we would probably want out of a trait. Unless your narrator is homebrewing fear mechanics, which is a viable thing to do, I don't see that this has a lot of actual gameplay moments, which is kind of a shame because it is a good idea. I can't give it any higher than a C. First aid is what clinician really should have been. It gives you an edge on logic checks to stop bleeding. Now, let's be very specific. It stops the bleeding condition. It doesn't heal people. It just stops the bleeding condition, and it is a logic check. Boy, that is narrow. That is not as good as it should be. It's better than clinician, but it is still not a great way of being a true combat medic. I think that first aid should basically allow you to put healing factor onto a character while you are actively treating them. That's the way I believe this should work, that they regain a certain number of hit points per round that you are actively tending to them. That would work a lot better, and you could also stop the bleeding condition, which is nice. As a narrator, I forget the bleeding condition is a thing half the time. And a lot of things don't interact with bleeding, right? A lot of weapons do not interact with bleeding. Okay, your energy control does not interact with bleeding. Your ability to do damage with phasing or with telekinesis, that does not institute the bleeding condition. A lot of things do not institute the bleeding condition. As a result, this is not that great. It could be a lot better. If I had a player who wanted to be a combat medic, which I think is a great concept, I would say that first aid for you means that you can stop the bleeding condition, and while you are actively tending to people, they gain the benefits of the healing factor power. That's what I would do. As it is, this is a C. Also, it's a logic check, so it has to be on a logic-based character to work at all. I just don't like this power. I just don't this trait. I just don't like this trait very much, and it's better than clinician, which is really sad. Next, we come to font of information. We have an edge on logic checks having to do with knowledge. That is the most generic description of a trait ever. Just knowledge, just knowing things. What things? Anything. It is a logic check, so it can't be an A because it's for logic-based characters, but this has to be a high B because this is the other side of the connections trait. Connections is I know other people, I'm going to speak to them. Font of information is I'm a well-read and well-researched person. I know lots of stuff. So font of information is a very high B. It lets you determine a lot of lore, know a lot of information, be able to make plans, be able to know what you're up against. It's only for logic-based characters, and that's the only reason that it is not an A trait. But it's a very high B. Next, we come to free running. I've talked about free running on this channel before, but we have an edge on all agility checks made to perform acrobatics during a movement action. Let's talk about this. Acrobatics just is dodging around something, moving around an obstacle, getting out of the way of something, going fast around buildings. There's lots of ways that acrobatics could be interpreted. But what's really crucial about free running is that it is a movement action. That does not mean running. That means anything that is movement. Web slinging, web gliding, flying, swimming, crawling on walls, and yes, running. All of these are movement actions. As a result, you now have an edge on anything tricky you're trying to do when being mobile with a host of mobility options. This is really good, and I'm struggling to think is there a reason it shouldn't be an A-? And in fact, that's what I'm going to give it, is an A-. Free running comes up all the time in all different parts of gameplay, not just combat, and affects all different types of movements. I think it's just named poorly, but free running is really good. It will come up a lot in games. It's helpful for all characters, not just highly mobile characters. In fact, you could say it's even better for characters that dumped their agility score. This is a really good trait. Yeah, A-. Next, we come to fresh eyes. We have an edge on all logic checks that have to do with facing something for the first time. Okay, it's only for logic, and it's only when dealing with something for the first time. So this is a niche situation, but being able to analyze something new that the narrator is throwing at you is useful. I have given things like first aid a C, and fresh eyes is better than first aid. As a result, I think I have to go B-. It's niche, but when it comes up, it's really powerful. I have a player in my game who has this, and it's beneficial. I like throwing new challenges at my players, so this is constantly relevant. I like it, it's good, I just wish it wasn't a logic check. Next, we come to Gearhead. We have an edge on all logic checks to figure out how machines work. This is really good. This is a great trait because machine is so generic, so open-ended that this will come up a lot because most superhero stories are set in the modern day. So yeah, this is one of those ones, if it wasn't a logic check, if it could also be vigilance, if it could also be operating it with agility, it would be an A. As it is, I think it's like a B+, but this is very valuable on the right character. Glibness gives us an edge on ego checks when persuading people that we're speaking to for the first time. So this has a limited use, and it's only for ego checks. So it is situational. That said, it lets you get into a situation and be effective in it immediately in a new environment. I think I've got to go C+ on this. It's more niche in its application, but it does have utility, so C+. Next, we come to God heritage. You're the god of something. You have an edge when you are dealing with something that you are the god of. This is so hard to quantify because it's so open-ended. It is so generic and so up to the interpretation of your narrator. The obvious thing to do is to say, I'm a god of battle, and therefore I have an edge on all action checks in battle, which is, that would be combat expert to the nth degree, and that's way too easy of a way to use this. I think that it's something that has to be negotiated, and there are restrictions around mythic origins that you have, of course, because you need to be maybe Olympian or Asgardian or something like that. This could be really powerful in a game. Like if you were the god of storms and it's a seafaring campaign, obviously that's going to be really powerful. I just don't know. I think I've got to give it a C, just because it's entirely up to narrator discretion. If your narrator is going to let you just become a god, this becomes insanely powerful. Most narrators are going to be conservative in the way that this is applied, and so I think we've got to be conservative as well as give it a C. Next, we come to Gullible. People have an edge on ego checks to persuade you of stuff. First of all, it's someone persuading you to do things, so it's a lack of control of the character. It's all downside, no upside. I think this has to be an F. I just don't like it. There is no upside here. Next, we come to honest. You are always honest. You have an edge on all ego checks that involve telling the truth, but you have trouble on all ego checks that involve telling a lie. I have a player who has taken this. She's just decided her character is always honest. So she bypasses the downside very easily. The open-endedness of the way that the ego check works is wonderful and is used to great potential for role-playing. This is a really good trait. It gives a lot of flexibility. It's a character building one. It gives an edge on persuasion. It stacks with other things. This is really good. I've got to give this a high B. This is a very good trait and very much worth your while if it fits with your character concept. Interrogation says that we have an edge on all ego or logic checks made when asking questions. I love that this also has logic checks. It means that your logic-based characters, which the Telepathic characters are amazing interrogators. This pairs with both mental stat blocks, which is awesome. And it's just asking questions in any circumstance. It does not need to be a formal investigation. This is a great way of building a interrogator character. It's flexible in how it interacts with what you're doing and how you built your character. I really like this. This is an A. This is really good. Next, we come to Inventor. You have an edge on logic checks when it comes to creating or repairing things. Okay, this is going to be campaign and narrator dependent. If your narrator is absolutely on board with a logic-based character being able to create things, then this has a ton of potential, especially if you create a character with lab access, which you would want to pair this with. Repairing things will come up situationally. And some narrators are going to be very restrictive about the way that you're able to invent items, and some just really want to see the creativity that you can come up with and are going to give you more flexibility. But this has to be on a logic-based character. It should be on a logic-based character with lab access, and it's narrator dependent. As much as I think this could be cool, I really have to give this a C. Next, we come to Investigation. This has multiple parts to it. We have an edge on Vigilance checks to spot for clues, which is something that's going to happen a lot in TTRPGs, and on logic checks relating to interpreting clues. So if you are an ego-based character, you're probably still bumping up your Vigilance score in order to have focus, meaning that your Vigilance checks are still going to be pretty good. If you are also a logic-based character as opposed to an ego-based character, this gets really good. Additionally, if we have access to a forensic lab, we gain a second edge on said checks. So this has the potential to get really good, which is fantastic. I also like that Vigilance is something that every character is going to put some attention into. There's nobody in Marvel Multiverse who dumps their Vigilance score. It would cripple your character. And so this has at least some level of potential for absolutely everybody. It sings on a logic-based character. This is a really high B, I think. In fact, I might even go so far as to say B+. Because it has to be on a logic-based character, I can't say that this is an A and everyone should go out of their way for it. But just having an edge on spotting clues is good. This is a fun one. I wish more people would take it. Next, we come to Iron Will. Enemies have trouble on edge attacks to control the character's mind and influence their behavior. Also, the character has an edge on ego checks to break free of mind control or compulsions. Here's something that's fun about this. The possession power, which Iron Will seems to be specifically designed to combat the possession mechanic. It stipulates that a character trying to possess a hero has trouble on the check anyway because it's somebody with the heroic tag. So actually this check is going to be stacking levels of trouble for the enemy, which is a really nice portion of this. How powerful is this? Well, it's a little bit narrator dependent. Most enemies do not have the real capacity to impose the possession mechanic. You need to have somebody that attacks focus, and you need to have somebody who has one of only 2 powers in the game, which are able to do possession to somebody with no focus left. So that means that this is a little bit niche in its application, so I can't give it higher than a C+, but when it's relevant, it's really relevant. This is one of those traits that you take and then it comes up one time in the game and you're going to be really glad you have it that one time. But don't forget, possession has trouble anyway for enemies, and there aren't a lot of compulsion or mind control things outside of only a few powers. So yeah, it's situational. Next, we come to Legal Eagle. We have an edge on all logic checks having to do with legalities. How often are superheroes really that worried about the law? I mean, really, this seems to just be a non-functional trait. I don't see how this is going to come up. Also, If you are not the legal expert, there are so many other traits and so many other things in just game mechanics that are going to give you the information you need regarding legalities. This is a D. It's not a very good trait. It's not detrimental, but the opportunity cost is so bad here, right? That you would be way better served taking something else. So this is a D. I cannot advise this particular trait. Next, we come to leverage. We have an edge on logic checks to investigate people and on ego checks to persuade people we have investigated. I have trouble thinking of the character that this really sings on, because most logic characters are going to dump ego and most ego characters are going to dump logic. And as a result, it's very difficult to build a character that actually is going to do well at both checks. And you can't give assistance through this check to somebody else, right? So if you are a telekinetic character, you can't give assistance to your ego companion, right? It just doesn't work in the way that I think the game designers wanted it to. It is okay, right? Because having an edge on logic checks to investigate people will come up, and that's the portion that's actually functional. But it is clunky, it's for logic-based characters only, and this doesn't give you the advantage that you really want. I think C+ is about as good as I can give this. Next, we come to loner. Your character does not play well with others. They cannot be given an edge via assistance by someone who is not a teammate. I do not love this at all. First of all, it is all detrimental. There's no upside to it, so it can't be rated very high off of that. Second, is something that you could RP without having the baggage of it being impossible to take an edge. This as a trait is something that is trying to mechanically make your characterization happen. And that just does not work. I think it's non-functional. Do I fail this one? I think I do. I think I have to give this an F. I just can't see this being something that is actually beneficial. I think it's a trap to go into it. I think you could RP this and be totally fine and not have it as an actual trait. Next, we come to monster. You are a monster of lore and have an edge whenever you attempt to intimidate someone. Notice the phrasing here. You're just trying to intimidate. And I allow several types of checks for intimidation. If somebody is a big-sized character, I allow them to roll melee as their intimidation check if they're physically large and imposing. Of course, ego is a perfectly good way to try to do an intimidation, and there are ways of phrasing a logic-based intimidation. And as a result, this is not really trying to say this is only for certain characters. This is just an intimidation capacity. And however you want to build your scary character, this will work on them, provided you have built a character that is a monster. This can't be an A because it's not for everybody. A lot of people are playing far more totally family-friendly or positive heroes, but the anti-hero character really does well with monster. This is a B or a B-. This is a good trait. I like it. I think on certain characters, this has a lot of potential and gives you avenues to explore, and it doesn't shoehorn you into being an ego-based character if you don't want to be, which is really good. Next, we come to out of shape. You are considered one size smaller for the purposes of lifting, carrying, swinging, and throwing things. There is no upside that is given. This is not abjectly terrible, right? A lot of characters don't pick up, carry, swing, or throw things, right? It doesn't come up all that often if it is not the concept of your character. So I don't think that this is abjectly terrible. It is entirely a characterization thing. That said, there's no upside. I can't give it higher than a D, realistically, but it has some potential for being at least a character building trait. I'm trying to find something positive here, but this is really not that good. I just can't imagine taking it, so yeah, D. Next, we come to piloting. Piloting says that you have an edge on all agility checks that are to pilot all and any kinds of vehicles. I really like this. This is a sleeper hit because if you take this, all of a sudden you've opened up the types of encounters that you have access to car chases, underwater submergibles, going into space. There are a number of types of things like just car chases or just attacking with aerial vehicles of different kinds that I as a narrator can build because I have a pilot at my table. So this opens up gameplay. Now sadly, piloting drops off as soon as your characters have the ability to create teleportation portals or to do time travel or omniversal travel. So it drops off in later gameplay, which is a shame. But I would say for the first 3 to 4 levels of gameplay, piloting actually is really fun and opens up the full range of encounters that I as a narrator can build, which make it more fun. I really like this. This is going to be a B, and I think it's a strong B. This is fun. This is an enjoyable one. That is all for this time. We will pick up from this point at our next video. YouTube's literally made out of buttons. I hope you press some of them, and I'll see you for the remainder later on. Thanks a lot. Bye.